It's no secret there are some challenging economic times ahead. The effect of COVID on the financial markets, employment, and general strain on businesses is already being felt and has the potential to last for some time yet. While challenging, it's not completely unknown territory. In the past, we've experienced a number of economic downturns, the most recent being the 2008 Great Recession, but going back through history, there's also been the energy crisis of the 70s and 80s, or going further into history, the Great Depression in the 30s. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sam and I head up Digital Solutions and Partnerships at Bench Media. We've had countless clients come to us over the past couple of months asking for help in regards to how to best navigate the upcoming period from both a business perspective and through the eyes of the marketing function. And while guiding them through, we thought what better way to share the knowledge and expertise than via a webinar. In terms of a run sheet, I'll spend a little time providing some context and top-line insight before moderating an approximate half-an-hour panel discussion with some exciting experts in their field. We'll introduce them properly a little bit later on, but as a top line, we have Brendan Watmore from Tourist Tracker and Aaron Fraser and Ryan Sullivan from Bench. Throughout the content today, we'll be including a few polls to get some insight from the audience, and on top of that, if you have any questions at all, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll get to them through the session. We'll also do a detailed follow-up on the questions for those that ask, and we'll turn the polls into a piece of content or blog post with the insights that we gain. And with that, let's get stuck into it. After a recent battering from COVID, coupled with global conflict, the whole world is facing hardship economically. We're here to discuss what that means for us in Australia as consumers and as marketers. From a consumer perspective, we have this twofold battle that's really quite genuinely impacting us. We have a looming recession, which is rightfully making people think more about where, when, and why they're spending their hard-earned cash. And we also have the cost of living that continues to rise. It's leading to Australians all over the country tightening their belts on shopping, dining, holidays, well, to an extent anyways, and booze. In fact, 85% of Australians consider the cost of living to be the #1 issue in the country. I'd be interested to see what that number looks like when the recession hits. But even without that data to hand, it's theoretically viable to assume that things will probably get a little tougher before they get easier. The response is that we're taking drastic measures to try and save some money. According to research by Nature, 89% of us are shopping for more specials and promos than we were this time last year. About 84% are dining out less, and a whopping 77% are reducing alcohol purchases. We don't necessarily see it slowing down either. About 80% of us expect grocery prices to continue rising. 85% of us are planning on using less gas, and nearly half of us are considering switching energy providers for cheaper alternatives. Essential spending is obviously a cause of stress for many. To help balance it out, we're also planning to pull back quite dramatically on non-essential spending. Spending less on things like technology, electronics, luxury items, sporting events, and homewares by anywhere between 55 to 61%. Luke Crellin, a consultant at Nature, said that the sentiment around the country is that it's getting to a point of becoming unbearable, with inflation outstripping wage growth and some people unsure about how they're going to keep up with their regular payments. Companies need to be very aware of how consumers are feeling and thinking, especially as they begin to resort to more drastic measures to mitigate the problem. Those businesses who can offer savings or build trust among consumers will win out. It's a really interesting one, the business or company response. During boom periods, CMOs of companies take over and businesses will often play a super offensive game. During recessions, CFOs take over and the defensive game comes to the fore. Costs get cut and stability is prioritised. It's often the case that when businesses begin to see a drop in revenue, they look inward at where they are spending and try and streamline their expenses. So it's not uncommon to see staff counts dwindle, offices downsized, or product roadmaps and future investments pulled back a bit. When the financial function within a business smell a recession on the horizon, the first thing they cut is marketing. But the question that I ask is why? The standard answer? It's perhaps the easiest cost that many businesses slash. It makes CFOs feel like they're making an instant and significant impact on profitability. In 2008-2009, the most recent comparable year to what we expect to be facing soon, the total global economic pullback was a touch under 1%. More accurately, it was about 0.7%. But advertising spend dropped a massive 10.1%. So it's a real disparate ratio, and one that we argue can negatively impact a business in the very important short term, as well as the longer term when looking to recover. Why cut the cost that has the ability to be the one that can most help to mitigate the damage? Marketing and advertising budgets. So the decision to slash advertising can't really be begrudged. On face value, there's a method to it. The past has shown that consumers keep their wallets in their pockets and businesses therefore deprioritise advertising. But is it the right decision? Throughout the business decision-making process, it's easy to look past the advertising opportunity that presents itself as long as you know how to do it well. Your companies are likely to cut back on spending, therefore that creates a less cluttered market and your opportunity for greater exposure increases. When competitors cut marketing, they stop reminding consumers about their existence. And this is a huge opportunity for brands to market smarter. You'll also stand out and receive greater customer attention. More advertising space will become available, leading to an opportunity to cut deals that benefit your brand. In addition to this point, environments like Google and Facebook are effectively marketplaces. Price is determined by supply and demand. Less demand equals more supply and more cost-efficient media. Dollar for dollar, recessions are actually one of the most efficient periods to invest ads in. You can also project stability and growth while your competitors are simply just weathering the storm. Step back in time and have a look at some of the examples of brands that seized an opportunity and ended up dominating the market. In the 1920s, Post was the category leader for dry cereals. During the Great Depression, Post cut ad spend down significantly, while Kellogg's doubled down on theirs. Kellogg's became the category leader with 30% profit growth. It has maintained those high market shares since. The recession of 1973 to 75 was triggered by the energy crisis, mainly due to petrol shortage. The US government at the time issued the first miles per gallon report, in which Toyota Corolla was second to Honda Civic. Toyota resisted cutting ad spend as opposed to other car brands, including Honda, and became the top imported car maker by 1976. Here in Australia, there have also been a number of leading companies that have launched in a recession. Think JB Hi-Fi and Billabong in the early 70s, and Harvey Norman and Priceline in the early 80s. In short, brands that held back their advertising spend saw little to no market share gains, while brands that continued with their marketing strategies benefited. Harvard Business Review backs this up by stating a firm's share of voice increases if it can maintain or increase its advertising budget during recessions when most firms are cutting back on promoting their brand. It's not the 1930s, 70s, 80s or 2008 anymore, so we do need to call out that we live in a different world now, and with that in mind, there are unknowns, but there is a lot to gain if marketing dollars are used well. We consume media much differently than we did back then. We are much more connected digitally. Data is more readily available for targeted advertising, and media is more trackable and accountable than ever before. The natural advice is to follow the consumers and take advantage of the technology and data available to us to run digital campaigns. They offer great targeting to minimise budget wastage on people unlikely to engage with your brand, flexibility to flick campaigns on and off or switch creative copy, and offer the ability to test, learn, and measure success. So, put your brand building budget behind targeted prospecting. Only data-driven digital advertising provides this opportunity. Consumers are much more likely to spend time consuming media at home. Their general internet and connected TV usage will increase as they minimise spending. And by running broadcast video on demand, online video, and digital out-of-home campaigns programmatically, you'll be able to take advantage of the technology and data to build brand and run targeted prospecting campaigns before converting these prospects. Alongside this, convert and retain the customers you already have. The simplest way to drive more top-line revenue is to convert the customers in your sales funnel and retain the ones you already have. Focus on search, social, and programmatic for audience segmentation that targets current customers with upsell or cross-sell promotions. Re-engage customers that have interacted with your website, and really take advantage of your first-party data to minimize recession damage. While the recession will impact all businesses in a number of different ways, there's a high chance you'll weather the storm and recover by remaining in the market with targeted digital strategies. On average, recessions last about 10 months, while periods of economic growth last 3 years. So there's a lot to gain if approached in the right way. Get in touch if you'd like to have a deeper discussion about what this can mean for you and your business and how we can help grow your brand. All right, now let's get stuck into our panel. As mentioned earlier, we've got a great group of people here to share some expert opinions in regards to their experience around all things marketing, particularly in periods that can be pretty challenging economically, such as a recession. We'll dive into the consumer mindset, the advertising opportunity, and how to be smarter with your marketing investments. So I've got some questions here prepared that I'll ask each of our guests, but of course feel free to jump in and discuss with each other along the way over the next half an hour or so. If I can just start by asking you to each introduce yourselves, your title, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Erin Fraser. I'm a Senior Account Manager at Bench Media. I've been in the programmatic space for about 6-7 years, but in media for 15 overall.
My name's Brendan Watmore. I'm the CEO of a company called Tourist Tracker. I have 25 years experience in advertising, a bunch of that in digital as well.
And I am Ryan. I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager for Bench. I've been in media now for probably about 10 years and programmatic for the last 6, I think.
Awesome, thanks all. With the first question, I think I'll just come straight back down the line again. But while I've got a whole bunch of expert strategists and marketers on this call, first of all, we're all consumers, right? So I'll start by asking each of you, what does the upcoming recession mean for you as a consumer? Do you expect you're going to keep spending, cut back on frivolous spending, holidays? Tell us a little bit.
Well, as someone with an expanding family and changing financial pressures, I do think that the upcoming recession will be a period for me to kind of reflect and assess on my spending. I think I'll be waiting to kind of see how the recession is impacting Australia in particular, and my household before I go making any frivolous purchases. That being said, though, I do feel like retail therapy in a period of high stress is super important for someone like myself. So I think I'll be a bit more discerning about where I'm spending my money. I'll be looking for those deals and where I can save but still get my spending out of my system. And I think that's where it's kind of an opportunity for marketers out there to engage with people and kind of show the benefit of staying on board with them during a recession. And it lines up with what we've seen in the past. People do kind of tighten the purse strings, but they still want to spend a little bit of money. It's just where they're going to spend it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, particularly coming into this recession, if we have a recession, right? Is that I think different people will be affected really differently. As with COVID, I work in travel, I have international clients, so we were really heavily affected during COVID. But my friends, they had a great COVID, going out, spending money, going on great holidays. So I think this will be patchy as well, because it's sort of, the headwinds are kind of quite varied. You've got things like supply chain issues, raising costs from China, energy prices. There's a lot of external factors. Everyone has a job. The job market is super tight, So I think that sense of confidence is what drives downturns or a lack of confidence. So if people are secure in their jobs and their household income, then those people aren't going to feel that as much as others might. So as a consumer, I'm kind of looking at the time we're moving into as positive compared to where I've been, which was devastating, So my position is different to yours, and it's probably going to be different to yours, Ryan.
Do you know, my position is quite similar to yours, actually. I'm kind of, frivolous spending is the best kind of spending, right? Who doesn't enjoy frivolous spending? Yeah. And I kind of feel, I know this sounds a bit melodramatic, but we've had our lives stolen for the last 2 years, that we've done nothing, we've gone nowhere. And I know if people had it a lot harder than we probably did, but I kind of feel like I've got 2 years worth of stuff to do. Holidays, give me all the holidays. So I'm going to cut back on stuff like bread, milk, food in general, and then just all the kind of tropical holidays for me, thanks.
Sounds good. So for any brands that are listening, you just want to target these 3 people and you'll have a great time moving forward out of this recession. But Brendan, you touched a little bit there on the travel industry. So it's had a great year following on from some pretty difficult COVID period. What lessons has it learned from those times to help safeguard it from the upcoming recession, do you think? I'm really interested in hearing about that from a business perspective, but then if you could double down and give us a bit of insight from the marketing point of view as well, that'd be great.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons out of COVID for businesses to manage a recession. So firstly, I think to survive a recession, it's about being agile. You know, when you look historically, there's a great article on Harvard Business Review looking at the ways different companies were affected during the recessions of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And certainly the bottom 17% of companies were really badly affected. They went bankrupt. But the top 10% actually performed strongly during the recession and coming out of it. And that's because of their decision making, really. So, you know, the ability to be agile, to be able to adapt to the conditions. I saw a lot of that, you know, from, you know, my local cafe, you know, during COVID, the way he was adapting was really inspiring, you know. So I think that agility is going to be really important. I think as you come into a slower economic time, there can be a tendency for companies to just wholesale get rid of staff. But everyone knows at the moment how difficult it is to get good staff. Now you look at an airline who furloughed staff, put planes in the desert. Now, the demand for international travel right now is through the roof. The only thing holding it back is an inability to get more aircraft in the air and that aircraft staffed. So that's what's holding those businesses back from further growth, is getting those people back. So, you know, when you look at a downturn as a company, yeah, you could think, oh, I'm just going to like wholesale, I'm going to cut like 15% of staff. But how long is that downturn going to be going for? And how hard is it going to be to get those people back to take advantage of the opportunities when things turn around? So I think they're the sorts of things that companies, you know, should be thinking about, and we don't need to reflect too far back in time to see, I think, some of those lessons.
Yeah, totally agree. That Harvard Business Review, the study that you're talking about, is quite an interesting one. We referenced it a little bit earlier on in the session, but effectively it kind of just said, from a really bastardized top-line summary, keep spending throughout a recession and you'll probably mitigate some of the damage. It's not going to work for everybody, but of course, if you can do things in a smart, intelligent way, then you're probably going to come out in the green, which is super important.
Yeah.
Now, Erin, I might just switch the dial a little bit outside of the travel industry. And one of the things that I've recently cut back on a little bit is my subscription services. I don't know if anyone else is the same. I had a bit of choice paralysis going on and spending a fair bit of money on those services. But between Spotify, Netflix, Binge, KO, Apple TV, because you keep going, there's a ton of them out there, they all add up pretty quickly. So I've dropped it back to one service for music, just using Spotify, and two for watchable content. Does this resonate with you? We've got a couple of questions off the back of it, I guess, but do you see any other changes in media consumption happening in the near future?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially over the whole BVOD and streaming services kind of sector, there's so much going on in that space. It's impossible, I think, to keep up with, even just from a consumption point of view, let alone a payment point of view. There's so many options. So I do think that we'll see changes in the way people are consuming that media. To your point, we'll see people cutting back. We'll see people sharing a little bit more amongst their households, probably sneakily externally from their households as well, sharing those costs. We might also see people doing something called subscription hopping, which is where they're following the content. So we know that our BVOD services have these big kind of masthead programs that come out throughout the year. And rather than staying loyal to one specific streaming service, we might see them following that content.
That's kind of what I see myself doing.
That's something that I know you do. I feel like we've spoken about this before.
So you started doing that already?
No, I think it's just something that I think I haven't started doing it properly, but I think you're right, you know, because there's far too many options, and there is that element of paralysis, so it kind of just makes sense to start doing the hopping.
Follow what's interesting, right? I also feel like with like Netflix and the likes of Disney bringing out their ad-supported version, which is a little bit cheaper, we will see people looking for alternatives that work for their budget and their household as a start. I think audio-wise, people do already tend to have a preference, so I don't know if we'll see as much change in that space, but definitely amongst the BVOD consumption. I will also say that with people like myself who might hold back on spending frivolously through this period on dining out or going on holidays, that might be where that money is spent. So there are kind of two ways of thinking about it. So for the people that are going to be going out on holidays and things, you'd probably scale back on the things that you're going to do at home. Whereas for people like me who are going to be home with a newborn, that's going to be my life. The TV is going to be my best friend, and I'm probably going to have a few subscription services still in the pipeline. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. But I might just touch on one thing that you've added there, because it's something that's super interesting to me at the moment. But let's go a little bit deeper into the Netflix ad-supported tiers. How do we feel like that's going to affect and change the BVOD landscape, for example?
I feel a little bit sour about the whole situation, to be honest. There should be, because we're not getting an ad-supported free version or a paid version, and that's how it should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of bit that really bothers me. I'd rather pay for an ad-free environment, and as a consumer, right? That's the choice you should have: is pay for it or get ads, not pay a little bit less for it and get some ads. It just doesn't sit well with me. So yeah, any of the subscription models that come out with a free or an ad supported, that's how it should be for me.
Yeah, very.
I've kind of been burned by Optus Sport. I love Optus Sport. I love watching the Premier League this time of the year. So my subscription's gone up, and there's loads of ads, you know. And I'm the same with you, Ryan. But I do think, you know, Foxtel rewrote that rule when they launched here. First launched, it was ad-free cable. That was the whole proposition, and then very quickly became subscription and ads. So that has been a standard. I think what happens though is that the market opens up for free-to-air broadcasting then. So no longer will you have this super different viewing experience, you know, where, you know, I find now if I watch free-to-air, I'm frustrated by the ads. But if I'm seeing ads everywhere, that's going to be less of a barrier, you know. So I think that's something for the streaming services to definitely consider is, okay, what are we doing to our product experience for the ad revenue? There's definitely a balance that's got to come into play there.
Yeah.
One thing I would say one last thing, but I'm not going to be too negative on Netflix because I feel like I quite enjoy it, so I don't want to be too mean about them.
They're listening to.
I know they probably are. Is the fact that they're trying to create contextual relevance around the ads being shown on the platform. I quite like that. Do you know? There's just that. It provides, and dare I say it, a little bit more value to the consumer than just being hit with any ad in a random sequence.
That was going to be my commentary. I feel like there is almost space for a third tier where it is just free advertising almost on those subscription-based services because of the contextual relevance that they're striving for. That's why I think there is that little element of payment there. It's because it is a tailored ad experience. You're not just going to get blasted with the man from Rebel Sport yelling down the camera at you.
I think the other thing that we might see in regards to the recession and our media consumption behaviours is that if we are out less and we are spending a little bit less money, perhaps we're all inside more, perhaps we're all consuming a little bit more content. And then perhaps the knock-on effect of that is that there's more data about us that we can use for targeted advertising. And probably the most important part is that we might see that there's this increase in supply because of us all consuming so much more media inside, maybe a little bit less of a cluttered ad environment from the business's competitors. And therefore, you're probably looking at a bit of that supply-demand kind of falling in favour of the advertiser for a nice change. So it could be a good opportunity for anyone that's out there that's listening to cut deals, start to have a look at how you can buy things a bit more cost efficiently and be a little bit smarter with your data as well. All right, Ryan, first one over to you, mate. Maybe a little bit less negative this time if possible.
Try my best, it isn't much.
So we've got quite a few brand marketers on the webinar today. I'm pretty confident in saying that everyone will currently be planning for the recession as we speak in some capacity. As I was doing some research on the webinar, a lot of what I was reading was pretty much just shouting spend more at me. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think that there's probably an air of spend smarter. What advice would you have? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I've read similar articles to yourself, Sam, about spend more, and I don't really think it's necessarily it's not about just spending more for spending more's sake. You know, talking about that Harvard Business Review article, there's an element where they're talking about the brands that actually spend through a recession, and if you think of a recession as generally that 10 to 12 month period, so the recovery period is much longer. The brands that do spend in branding come out far stronger than the ones that do not.
For sure.
That being said, it's not, I really don't think it's just a case of spending more for spending more's sake. Let's be honest with ourselves, when it comes to media and marketing, regardless of economic situations or conditions, you can always spend more, right? So the way I see it, if we're talking about branding specifically, it's about kind of changing that mindset. It's about changing your process and your thinking and your strategy from mass branding and making it about targeted branding. Kind of the way I kind of see it is, like, unless you are a Unilever, unless you are a Coca-Cola, you have a target audience, right? Most brands do. So mass branding, you shouldn't be looking at mass branding anyway. Do you know? If you've got a limited budget, it should be looking at how do I maximize my budget and only reach my audience with my message. So that's kind of where I see things. And look, I'm going to kind of blow the programmatic trumpet. That's kind of where programmatic comes into its own a little bit, right? Because it's about addressability. It's about taking that I am reaching anyone to, I know exactly what audiences I am reaching, and doing so in an agile fashion as well, because then you can be very reactive in a positive way to not just economic conditions, but also environmental conditions. Do you know, if we look at what we've had recently with floods and with horrendous weather conditions, that ability as well, these things affect how people strategize their campaigns. So that ability to be agile and to be addressable means that you get a far more impactful and measurable result from your branding.
Bang on. Just to pull out a couple of the key words that you used there, you've sort of started talking about maximising reach, you've spoken about addressability, you've spoken about targeted reach, you've spoken about being agile and reactive. All of those things obviously point to programmatic. But it's all about being smarter with the way that you're spending. And I think part of being smarter means really having a grip on the data in the ecosystem. So Brendan, I might pass this one over to you because given your knowledge of the landscape, what should a business be looking for in regards to data, especially if you're sort of looking from maybe a pre-campaign research point of view, and then while the campaign's active from a targeting point of view?
Yeah, look, I think data and knowing your audience is a really important part of it. But I think, coming into a downturn, it can be a really positive time to invest in technology generally. And I think from a marketing perspective, that means measurement. I think is really doubling down on understanding exactly what, your investments are delivering for the company. And I think the ability to be agile, to try things, switch things on and off, are a really big part of that, as long as you've got that clear measurement. I think that's going to be really important for CMOs to be able to justify their budgets to CFOs in this sort of time. And then coming back to your question, I think what you're talking about, in relation to data is knowing your consumer, and that's connecting with your current customers, but also understanding where your new customers might be. And certainly being able to be precise in how you're reaching different audiences. There's got to be an opportunity in these sorts of times to repackage product as well. If your customers are at the high end and those sales are drying up, is there a way that you can repackage and reposition a product at a different market, and then reach them and understand how those two different propositions are performing? I think all of that intelligence is really important. And oddly enough, if you're coming into a downturn, that's actually a great time to start to re-gear from your technology perspective. There tends to be capacity in organisations anyway at that time. If sales are dropping, the opportunity cost of change is lower in that time as well. And it means that you are geared well when you come out of the recession. You're more efficient, and you're in a better operating position. So I think, yes, data targeting, etc., is all important, but that's really about understanding who your customer is and being able to connect with them efficiently.
Yeah, nice. And what advice do you have for just simply how to get started?
I think they should call you, Sam.
I'm asking you the questions. Come through me.
I think it's really about doing your planning now. Is actually workshopping the different scenarios.
Yes, totally agree.
So that you're not panicking if things start to turn. That you know what you're going to do, you know what you're going to try, and that's for a whole organisation, right? That's not just the marketing department. That's the whole organisation. Yeah, little things like planning scenarios, decentralising decision making so that you can be more agile. You can make those decisions and make those changes really quickly. I think it's really thinking through what might happen.
Yeah.
That's how you begin.
Nice. And I might just jump on something else that you said there as well, but pass this out to all three of you. But one of the key parts that you mentioned was measurement, so that you can justify things to the CFO and continue to get budgets signed off. Working in digital, things are super measurable. You can sometimes do things not you can sometimes not go deep enough. You can sometimes go way too deep, and we can start to confuse everybody. What's the sort of happy balance, and how do you measure the success?
That's a really good question, actually. I think kind of to the point of understanding your audience and having a real understanding of what your offering is and what it solves for. You then know your goals and what you need to measure. And I think there's so many partners in the industry that measurement is their bread and butter, that can provide that to you and help you kind of break that down. Whoever you're working with in a digital field should be able to help guide that conversation and kind of help you find the right partners if they're not the right partner for that conversation. But there are so many reports available, I know just through the work that we do, that can show, the impact of upper funnel branding on your lower funnel metrics and the different elements of each channel with converting across audiences. Like, there's so much analysis that is available in market. So I just think understanding what you need to know in order to justify your spending and costs is the first port of call, and then finding out who can provide that for you.
Yeah. So
What Erin's saying is absolutely right. It's about having and finding it and connecting with the right partner in market, working with somebody that will actually guide you through that process as well. Do you know, it's the industry, especially the programmatic and digital in general, has changed so much, even in the last 3 to 5 years, in terms of channel and data and what's available and measurement and everything. So really finding a partner that will guide you through that, and also kind of not be afraid to learn yourself. Come from a point of like accepting that you may not know everything, but get in and dive into it and learn it. And I think that's really where you'll see a lot of value as well.
I think to your point with the industry that we're in, it evolves so quickly. Understanding no one knows everything. So you should never feel embarrassed or held back from saying, I need help with this. Like, that's what partners, like, we're all here to learn and evolve, and help our advertisers and brands do that. So
yeah.
And how do you navigate that, Ryan? You're part of the agency team here at Bench, so a big part of what you do is going out and talking to a bunch of different agencies and educating them and being that trusted partner. How do you like to navigate that landscape? I'll start with, how do you navigate that and go out and talk to people about their upcoming plans for the recession, but then also, is it all just talking to them about what their brands are doing, or do you also have to put a bit of a spin on what their competitors are doing and keeping one eye on the competitor landscape as well?
Right. Well, okay, I'll kind of answer this in a kind of twofold kind of way, right? A brand will engage, when a brand engages an agency, it is basic due diligence and best business practice for that agency to know that brand and to know that brand's entire world, right? So competitors, landscape, and in terms of competitors, also knowing what they are doing from a media and marketing perspective, right? That's fairly standard practice. Why it's valuable for both the agency and the brand, though, is this is the twofold element, is it allows you to be a bit more strategic with your planning, it also allows you to have some potentially tough conversations internally, right? So kind of what I mean by the strategy piece is you're working with client A and they want to compete with their closest competitor, market client B, for example. Lovely names. But client B may well be spending, let's say $2 million on BVOD. That's their budget. Your client A, have got 250 grand to spend for the same time period. Okay, so there's two things that you need to be doing there. A is the strategy piece. You need to know where that budget is being spent, because it may well be that that's the amount that you have available to you, right? That's how much the brand has to spend, and there's no going beyond that. So it's about looking at alternative strategies for that brand and for that agency to guide that brand. So this would be looking at other channels, for example, other branding opportunities through things like video, through through audio, through programmatic outdoor, for example, and then also being able to guide them a little bit on, like, yes, your budget may be less than your competitor, but what we can do is maybe add a little bit more of that targeted branding and that measurable branding, and adding in some performance channels down the track, so to really create that kind of full funnel strategy with a lesser budget. So it's about doing more with less again. But it also does help you have those tough conversations, or help your agency have those tough conversations with their brand. If that brand's primary objective is all about competing with their closest competitor, then they need to understand that 250k isn't going to cut it against 2 million, and so potentially the CMO needs to have some tough conversations with the CFO to get more budget to compete competitively. Compete competitively? You know what I mean? Be competitive.
So you're effectively saying there that the demand principles don't really change. They stay pretty similar from a consumer point of view, but we've got technology and data that we can access now we can make to use things much more smarter. I might just hold on to that comment around the CMOs and CFOs for a second and pass it over to you, Brendan. But what advice do you have for the CMO that's going to talk to the CFO to secure those budgets?
Yeah, so I think one of the sort of weaknesses of digital has been a fear of getting super measurable, right? I know that sounds weird, but we've tended to stand behind vanity metrics like impressions and clicks and say, look how well this is going. We've really, without a clue of how well it's really going.
Around your campaign.
Yeah, so I think it's about trying to work, if you're a specialist in that digital area, how do you work with the CMO to get more confident? Don't be afraid of really trying to connect what you're doing with genuine outcomes, because that's only going to help. It's going to help you measure, and it's going to help you adapt and find the things which are working. But I think in these sorts of environments, people can tend to sort of stand back and say, well, I'm just going to deliver this stuff which, looks like value for money, but is it really actually making a difference? So I think that's how we, or as digital specialists, you can help a CMO, is give them confidence in what they're putting forward to the CFO and CEO as plans.
No, I think you're spot on. I'm jumping in here, sorry, but it's one of these things, right? Digital speaks a language that not many people understand, right? We use far too many acronyms. The industry is quite complex, blah, blah, blah. But you come back to basic human emotions, right? If you do not understand something, you will not trust that thing. And if you do not trust it, you will not buy it. So you need to create that real linear level of trust with the CMOs and the CFOs. You have to speak a language that people understand, and I think that's something that we as an industry do not do very well.
Yeah, and do we take that emotion into our campaigns when we're talking to consumers as well? I sort of noticed that when we were going through COVID, there was a lot of emotive language being used in creative, and it all was kind of this big giving everybody a hug kind of moment alongside it. Do you think that we should be keeping that in mind when we're moving into recession periods as well?
Look, I found it all a bit cheesy, if I'm totally honest. the brands had nothing to say all of a sudden. So this was, and they just saw that other brands were kind of saying, "Hey, we're with you through this dark time with a 10% discount." It's like, oh, come on, like let's be honest with ourselves. You want to shift units of product. If you've got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all.
I think your point on creative is important, though. I think. Yeah, when I first started in advertising, there's dudes walking around with texters drawing layouts, and so there's a lot more time, effort, and money went into the idea, and with the ease of digital, some of that's been lost. So a creative agency will pump out a banner because it doesn't make them much money. They don't spend a lot of time on it as well. But in a world where, we're buying data to improve a click-through rate, or who's really looking at the quality of the idea? And I think that's actually a frontier to be recrossed, if you like, is what is the value of a better ad to a campaign. So I think certainly in digital we have been guilty.
It gets lost in digital.
It definitely does. I've seen, worked in big publishers, the ads come in, it's like no one's even looked at it. You know what I mean? And it's run and 100 grand spent against it, and boom, you're on to the next thing. There's your report of clicks and impressions, thanks very much. I just think we've got to be better than that.
Yeah, I think so too. And going a little bit off script now, but we've spoken about vanity metrics. I think one of the sort of things that the industry's talking about a lot to try and get past the vanity side of things is the attention economy. Anyone got any advice or insights that they'd like to add around attention?
Look, I think I love a new term for an old thing. That's for sure. So a better idea. Oh wow, attention economy. Sure. What that is doing is applying a statistic, a measurement criteria to how good an idea is. So I love it, But again, it's sort of a very digital metric to sort of prove a format, It's like, the 6-second ad, right? The 6-second ad was invented to suit Google and Facebook, not because of some great piece of research that understood that, that's what consumers need. It's like 100 years of 30 and 60-second ads. We can get paid 2 to 3 times for that 15-second slot now. So a lot of this stuff is not driven by a consumer understanding or an idea or a way of really engaging someone. It's driven by technology formats, So sure, so that creates an environment, and you've got to work with that environment. But I think that's where the challenge is for creativity. Is okay. How do I get across? How do I engage someone? In the environment they're in. Yeah. So, back to your question, the attention economy. I think it's always been there. I love that there's a different way of measuring it, because I think it kind of removes the conversation or moves the conversation on from, say, clicks. But what's the connection between attention and outcomes? For a brand.
I think that's what all the providers are trying to figure out as we speak, so that we can invest more money into attention. I might just finish off by going down the line here again, but we've covered quite a lot. It's going to just be a nice selfish one to just wrap everything up. But if you've got sort of one key takeaway as to why you should be investing in digital maybe versus above the line advertising throughout a recession, why?
For me, it's the flexibility. I think it's been touched on several times today. The ability to kind of assess the audience, figure out where they are, what they're doing, how they're consuming content throughout that period, and how best to engage with them. And then we also know that during periods like recessions and even COVID, the assumed behaviour of the audience is probably not going to be right. We're not going to know until we're in it what they're doing and where they're going. So with digital, you have that added ability to move budget, change your targeting, and change the context of how you're engaging with those audiences based on the audience. And I think that's probably the most powerful thing about digital going into a recession.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think you're right. Like the measurement aspect's really key, as we've discussed. I think personally, the way I look at digital campaigns is a little bit as a bellwether for a strategy. So if I have a strategy which is encompassing a lot of different kind of media and a lot of different tactics, because digital is giving me signals constantly, it helps me to understand whether the broader strategy is working. So that's why I like digital. It helps give me a guide to what's happening more generally, and if I need to adjust things, I can work that out pretty quickly.
Yeah, to be honest, both of you have kind of covered it off pretty well. We've mentioned it a lot across this webinar, but agility and addressability. The addressability piece for me is just a no-brainer now. Unless you want to reach every single human being possible, which not many brands do, then you want your marketing strategy to be targeted around your core audience, right? That's just a given for me. The agility piece, given what we've came through, economic pressures, environmental pressures with COVID and you know, climate change and what have you, the ability for brands to be agile and to react, you know, but to react without losing is the big thing, you know. Historically, when you know, if you signed up for a traditional outdoor campaign, you spent your $1 million. That $1 million was covered, right? You know, no matter whether it was rain, hail, or shine, you were spending that money. Those billboards were up. But you know, the ability to really react to external factors now is going to really help brands in the long run.
Yep, fully agreed. All right, thanks guys. That's about all we've got time for today. So a big thanks, Erin Fraser, Brendan Watmore, and Ryan Sullivan. Really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your busy days. For any questions that we didn't quite get to today, we'll follow up for sure. Leave that with us so that we'll send everything over. But thanks for your valuable insight, guys. And until next time, we'll get you back onto another panel for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.